Myth number 9, it's not a baby, it's just a clump of cells. The whole morality of the act of abortion hinges on whether or not the entity that begins growing in the female body at the moment of conception is a living human person or not. This is really the issue at the heart of this debate, and it couldn't be any simpler. If it's not a human person, that little entity that begins growing at the moment of conception, there is absolutely nothing immoral about abortion, and we probably should have been at home today watching reruns of the Tua Cameron fight, you know? Sorry, we wasted your time. Okay? But if it is a human person, then abortion is a gravely immoral act which kills a tiny human being. And you know what else? Abortion has been the single most destructive act ever perpetrated on humankind. It has killed more people than any other single act in human history. So why does the church so passionately and unwaveringly speak up for the rights of unborn babies? On what grounds can the church be certain that unborn babies are really human persons who are entitled to the same right to life as you or I? Well, for starters, science supports that. There is no doubting the fact from the moment you were conceived, you had your own unique DNA. All of the top embryologists around the world are in agreement that human life begins. In fact, one top embryologist said every human life has a very neat beginning, and that beginning is the moment of conception. All the genetic and biological material that was needed for the rest of your life was present at the moment you were conceived. At the moment of conception, something totally new, something unique, substantially different comes into existence that was not present 2 minutes before conception occurred. It wasn't present 30 seconds before conception occurred. We talked before, we heard Robert talk about this morning about human potentials, the ability to reason, to love, free will, all of these exclusively human things. Well, guess what? Only human beings have these human potentials. Only human beings have the ability to develop into such potentials. And guess what? Every embryo has the ability to develop into those human potentials. So if only human beings have access to those human potentials, and embryos have access to those human potentials, then what does that make an embryo, a human embryo? Don't leave me hanging. A human being. It can't be anything else. You won't come back in 9 months and find a lump of concrete growing in the womb. You won't come back in 9 months and find a chicken, like I was talking about this morning. You will find a human baby. Okay? All of us, in fact, look around the room right now. Have a quick look around. Look at everyone else around the room. Make them feel uncomfortable for a second. Have a look around the room. Look back at me. Okay? You were all just looking at a whole lot of former embryos. None of you could sit here in this room today and listen to me talk if you weren't once embryos. It's part of the human experience. You cannot be an adult without being an embryo. We didn't kickstart you at 3 months or 9 months or 2 years old. You had to start at that stage. Some people say, oh, it doesn't look human. It hasn't got consciousness. It hasn't got consciousness. You have to be conscious to be a human person. Well, guess what? Every night you go home, you go to bed, you close your eyes, and you fall into a state of unconsciousness, we call sleep, for 8 hours or so. You wake up in the morning and you go, it just feels like it was 11 o'clock last night. I was putting my pillow on the head, and here it is at 7 a.m. And you have no recollection of what happened. You didn't do anything exclusively human. You were unconscious for 8 hours. So did you cease to be a human person while you slept? It's a pretty easy answer. Hint, hint, it's the answer. No. Okay? You didn't. You were fully human. You didn't do anything exclusively human when you slept last night. Guess what? A baby in the womb who is unconscious, does not have consciousness yet, is in exactly the same state. It'll just take them a little bit longer to develop that consciousness. You woke up 8 hours later, away you go. It was more immediately available to you. But for that child, it'll take a little bit longer. But that child is still a human person, even though it doesn't exercise its a higher faculty of consciousness. And you know what, last of all, some people say, oh well, we can't be certain whether it's a human being or not, so let's just say that we don't know and carry on aborting babies anyway. That is the most irresponsible, morally irresponsible argument you could make. Let's imagine you went hunting in the bush, and you're there, you got your rifle fully loaded, and you hear a rustling off in the bush 500 metres away. So what do? All you hear is a rustling. You turn, you fire everything out of the clip into the rustling in the bush. You go up, you pull back the bush, and you see a dead hunter, a fellow hunter lying dead, and you've shot him. You go to court, and you say, and the judge says, this is willful. You've willfully neglected to verify your target. You fired anyway. You killed another human being. It's manslaughter. You say, oh, but Your Honour, I didn't know whether it was a human or not, so I fired anyway. Oh, okay, case dismissed. That's okay then. You didn't check your target. The same is true of this abortion issue. It's not good enough to say, oh, we don't know whether it's a baby or not, so let's just keep aborting them anyway. You know what? If we're not certain, we have an obligation to stop aborting babies. Because we don't know whether or not we are destroying innocent human beings. The last two myths real quickly. Number 10, abortion is needed in cases of pregnancy after rape. Well, first, for starters, conception after rape is actually not as common as some pro-abortionists try and make out. I know of one abortionist who had performed thousands of abortions, and he can remember one, maybe two cases in that entire thousands of abortions that were for a situation of rape. The problem with the difficulty of sexual assault is that the female body is exposed to some terribly horrendous and extreme trauma, stress, and under those situations it is actually difficult for the female fertility cycle to work properly and to conceive a child. So it isn't as common as some people suggest. So even if we did say let's outlaw abortion except in the cases of rape, in this country we would have something like 18,000 fewer abortions every year in this country. You know what the real big problem with this argument is though? If we encourage women who have been raped and get pregnant to have abortions, we are simply exposing women who have been exposed to the terrible violence of rape and sexual assault to be exposed to even further violence through the process of abortion. And we create another victim. We've already got the first victim, who is the woman. We then turn the baby into a victim. If you want to see a really good explanation of this, the movie North Country with Charlize Theron, and has a beautiful scene in it where she talks about her little child. You find out partway through the movie that her little baby was conceived through rape. And she says she's sitting down on the porch and she's talking to her son and she says, when I first had you inside me, when I first found out you're pregnant, I hated you. I hated you. I thought you were his. But when I felt you kick, I realised you were mine. And I loved you. It's a powerful, powerful scene. Myth number 11, this is the final one. Abortion is the easiest way to deal with a crisis pregnancy. It simply isn't true at all. There is no easy way to address crisis pregnancy. It's a difficult situation. It requires a lot of time, support and assistance. What abortion does, it brings a crisis pregnancy to a rather abrupt and violent end, and it exposes a woman to all sorts of terrible pain and trauma that she didn't need to be exposed to. So it makes an already difficult situation even worse. We need to help women who are in crisis pregnancy, not offer them the violent death of their unborn child. They need our support, our care and our love. They don't need violence. They don't need more harm. I'm finished. I want to leave you this one challenge, because I hope you've been challenged today. I hope you haven't just sat there and thought, oh, that's nice, my ears are tickled, I want you to be challenged. And I want you to go from here today, and I want you to remember this. When we're older and our grandkids we've got grandkids, hopefully we've lived to a ripe old age, and hopefully things have changed in our culture about abortion. And our grandkids say to us, Granddad, Grandma, how could that happen? What did you do? What did you do to speak up? What did you do to make a difference? What are you going to say to your grandkids? What are you going to say to them? Thank you for listening.